I saw him. My dad. Raising his phone, smiling. For a second, I thought he was capturing my moment. Me, walking across the stage as valedictorian. But no. His camera lens was pointed elsewhere. At her. My cousin, Amber. The girl who wasn't even graduating. The girl who had always been more his daughter than I ever was. People clapped. Names were called. But in that moment, my heart cracked in silence. You ever feel invisible at your own celebration? Like you worked your whole life for applause. But the only person you wanted to clap just looked the other way? The applause thundered as the MC called my name. Hailey Walker, valedictorian of the graduating class. I rose from my seat, every step toward the stage supposed to feel like triumph. But then I saw him, my dad, standing up with his phone, finally. My heart fluttered for a second, hoping. Then I followed the lens of his camera. It was pointed at Amber. She wasn't even graduating. She stood 3 rows behind me, smiling effortlessly, hair perfectly curled, in a dress that shimmered under the lights. Dad waved at her, mouthed something I couldn't hear, and snapped several photos like she was the one being honored. I froze. The stage suddenly felt longer, colder. I kept walking, because that's what I was good at. Moving forward, even when it hurt. People clapped. I smiled. On the surface, I looked like the perfect success story. But inside, something shifted. Something fractured. Later that night, at the family dinner, the pattern repeated itself like a song I never chose to learn, but somehow knew by heart. Dad toasted Amber for being such a graceful young lady and laughed about how she had been the star of every event growing up. Mom smiled politely, and I just sat there. The cake came out, white frosting, pink flowers, and a single name scrawled on top, Amber, again. I remembered my 7th birthday. Amber blew out the candles before I could reach the cake. Dad laughed, saying, "She's just excited for you, sweetie." But the cake had only her name on it. Every photo from that party? I wasn't in any of them. I once asked Dad why he kept mixing up our names. He chuckled. "Sorry, Amber. I mean, Hailey. You two are just so close." I laughed it off then. I don't laugh anymore. And maybe you know what I mean. Maybe you've been in a room full of family and still felt like a stranger. Maybe you've sat through dinners where everyone talks over you, past you, through you. Like you're just noise, not voice. Have you ever looked around at a celebration thrown for someone else and asked yourself, am I just the help here? That night I returned home alone. The apartment was silent, as if it too understood the weight pressing on my chest. I couldn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I wandered into Mom's storage room, looking for an old notebook or maybe a forgotten version of myself. I didn't expect to find a locked wooden box tucked beneath a pile of old sweaters. It looked too intentional to be forgotten. I knew I shouldn't open it, but curiosity overrode guilt. Inside, there were old photographs, letters, and one folded document that made my breath catch in my throat. Amber's birth certificate. Father. Thomas Walker. My father. The room spun. I sat down on the floor, clutching the paper like it could explain itself. My cousin was my sister. And not just my sister, my half-sister, the daughter of my father and someone else. Amber wasn't just loved more. She was protected. She was cherished. She was his. Suddenly, so much made sense. The favoritism, the smiles, the way Dad's eyes lit up when she entered a room, and dimmed when I spoke. He wasn't just comparing us. He was compensating for guilt, for a mistake, for a love he never had the courage to claim in front of my mother. And what about Mom? Did she know? Had she known this entire time? The silence felt like betrayal. The smiles felt like lies. I sat by my window all night, watching the world go by in quiet denial. The streetlights blinked like tired eyes. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stopped. For the first time in my life, I didn't want to try harder. I didn't want to prove myself. I didn't want to be valedictorian or invisible or the good girl who understood. I just wanted to disappear, and as the sun slowly painted the sky in shades of pink and blue, I asked myself a question I never dared voice before. If I vanished tomorrow, would anyone even notice? I didn't tell anyone what I'd found in the box. Not yet. It sat in the back of my closet, wrapped in an old hoodie like a wound I couldn't stop touching. But I kept going. I showed up to class. I submitted research. I smiled when I needed to smile. A few weeks after that night, I received the university's most prestigious undergraduate award for innovation in neuroscience. My project, on cognitive recall under emotional distress, was selected to be presented at a national conference. I was chosen as valedictorian, selected to give the commencement speech. I was doing everything right, and still, no one at home noticed. Dad congratulated me with a distracted, "Good job, kid." Amber said, "Is that the one where you just stare at people's brains all day?" She laughed like it was charming. No one corrected her. So I started planning my speech. If they weren't going to see me in this house, I'd make sure the world saw me on that stage. My words wouldn't be bland thank yous and empty promises. They'd carry weight. They'd bleed truth. One evening, I came home to find Mom and Amber at the dining table, scrolling through Amber's phone and laughing. I was too tired to ask. But then I saw it, my name on the screen. Amber had posted about my award, not in celebration, not with pride, just a photo of my certificate with the caption, "When you study 24/7 because you've got no social life, try hard and you know one cares." The post had dozens of likes, some from family members. I stared at it longer than I should have. The anger started in my chest, like a small flame. But it didn't explode. It simmered, hardened. And that night, I rewrote my entire graduation speech. Not even my advisor knew what I planned to say. No more polished surface. No more silent acceptance. If this was going to be my moment, it would be my truth. The days ticked by with mechanical efficiency. Final presentations, deadlines, emails. I moved through them like a machine. People congratulated me in the halls. Professors patted my shoulder. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely. I was building something. A reckoning. The weekend before graduation, we had a small family dinner. Dad made steaks. Mom decorated the table with tulips. Amber wore white, as always. Somewhere between the appetizers and dessert, she leaned forward and said to the whole table, "You know, Hailey's just really good at school, because she doesn't have any distractions. No friends, no parties, no fun. I guess it helps when you're not actually living." The table chuckled awkwardly. Dad smirked, said nothing. I stared at my fork. Amber went back to her drink like she hadn't just gutted me in public. The next morning, I sat across from a therapist I'd only seen twice before. I wasn't even sure why I went that day, but something inside felt heavy enough to drag me down. She asked gently, "When was the first time you felt like you weren't good enough?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at the ceiling, the floor, my hands. Then I said it. "My dad once called me Amber. Not as a joke, just absent-mindedly. And he didn't even notice." The tears came before I could stop them. Not loud, not dramatic, just silent, slow, like the breaking of something that had held on too long. The therapist handed me a tissue, waited. She didn't fill the silence. That made it worse, or better. I couldn't tell. I'm tired, I whispered. I'm tired of performing, of proving, of showing up. I'm tired of chasing applause from people who only ever look the other way. She asked me if I wanted to talk about it more. I shook my head. Then I said, "Graduation is next week. I'm giving a speech, and I think it'll be the last time I try to make them see me." I met her by accident. Like most things that matter. Her name was Vanessa Reed, a guest speaker in my ethics in research seminar. She was sharp, unfiltered, and unlike anyone I'd seen, invited to speak at our campus. She told the room that family dynamics often distort our sense of self-worth. "Sometimes," she said, "you're not the problem. You're just standing too close to someone who refuses to see you." After class, I stayed behind. Something about her presence felt safe. I told her, carefully, cautiously, that her words hit home. She looked at me, steady and soft, and said, "You don't have to make them see you, Hailey. You just need to see yourself." That night I couldn't sleep, not out of anxiety but clarity. I replayed her words over and over. For the first time, they felt like permission. 2 days later in a lecture, I noticed something. A student, first year shy, always sat in the back, was being mocked by a group of loud classmates. Normally I'd stay quiet, but something inside cracked open. I stood up. Calmly, I walked over and said, "If you need to laugh at someone to feel smarter, you're not learning, you're performing." The class went silent. I didn't know someone had recorded it. By the time I left the building, my phone was buzzing. A TikTok video had gone viral overnight. Me, standing up, voice steady, eyes direct. The caption read, "She's had enough. Invisible but powerful." By the weekend, there were thousands of comments. Some from strangers, others from students on campus. Finally, someone said it. "She's the voice we needed. She's not invisible anymore." I cried alone in my room, reading those words. Not because I felt proud, but because I felt seen. Not for my GPA, not for awards, just for showing up as myself. The student I defended messaged me privately. "No one's ever stood up for me. I'll never forget it." Vanessa texted, "You've always had that voice. You just needed to hear it yourself." The school's newspaper contacted me, asking for an interview. They wanted to feature my story, my background, my struggles. "This is inspiring," the journalist wrote. "You're the girl who made the invisible visible." I replied, "You can share my journey, but please, don't mention my father." Not out of anger, but because I no longer needed his absence to define my presence. The university planned a celebration dinner for all award recipients. My family, of course, decided to throw their own party, one that would better reflect our family values, as Dad put it. I didn't go. Instead, I texted Mom and asked her to meet me for dinner. Just the two of us. She agreed, though reluctantly. We met at a quiet cafe outside campus, the kind of place where no one asked questions, and silence didn't feel like judgment. She looked older than I remembered, tired. Her hands fidgeted with her napkin as she spoke. "Your father wanted to come too." "I know," I said. "That's why I asked for just you." We sat for a long while, not saying much. Then I asked, "Did you know?" She hesitated, then nodded. "I've always known about Amber." I didn't speak. "I was pregnant with you when I found out. He told me it was a mistake, that he'd never see her again. But her mother disappeared, and one day, there she was, in our lives. I couldn't bear to tear it all apart. I thought I could handle it. You chose peace over me." "I chose survival, Hailey." "And what did I get to choose?" She didn't answer. Her eyes were glassy. "I needed someone to fight for me," I said. "But you just stood there. Every time." She reached for my hand, but I didn't offer it. The food arrived, untouched. We didn't speak much after that. I paid the bill, stood up slowly, and looked at her one last time. Before leaving, I placed an envelope on the table. Inside, a note I had written days earlier. It read, "Dad didn't lose you. You lost me." The email came in at 9:13 p.m. Sharp. "Commencement ceremony will be broadcast nationwide. Prepare accordingly." I stared at the message on my screen, rereading it like the words might shift into something more personal. They didn't. But somehow, the weight of those simple lines felt heavier than any exam I had taken. Not even a minute later, Amber texted, "What should I wear tomorrow? The whole country's gonna see me standing behind you." I stared at her message. There it was again, that subtle rebranding of my life into her backdrop. I typed slowly, deliberately, "You won't be behind me." She replied with a laughing emoji, then nothing more. That night, I walked into the empty auditorium. The chairs were set in perfect rows, stage lights dimmed to blue. I stepped onto the platform, imagining the crowd, the noise, the heat, the eyes. But in that moment, it was quiet. Just me and the ghosts of every time I'd sat in the corner, unseen. Every science fair where Dad only took photos of Amber. Every award night where Mom clapped just loud enough not to seem absent. I sat on the edge of the stage and looked out into the void. No applause, no cameras, just silence. I whispered my speech into the air, feeling each word bounce back without judgment. For once, I wasn't rehearsing for their approval. I was practicing letting go. Morning came fast. I sat in the prep room in my cap and gown, listening to names being called over the speaker system. The nerves were strange. Less about fear, more about finality. Today wouldn't fix anything, but it would change something. A student assistant knocked on the door. "You're up next." I stepped into the hallway, the roar of the crowd rising like a wave ahead of me. As I waited behind the curtain, I felt the camera lens from the balcony zoom in on my face. I didn't flinch. If anything, I leaned into it. Let them see me. Let them finally see me, the announcer's voice echoed. "Our valedictorian, Hailey Walker." I stepped forward. The lights hit me. My breath caught. But I didn't pause. "Good morning," I began. "I've written a lot of speeches in my life. Academic ones, scientific ones, even a few that were never meant to be heard. But today's isn't about knowledge or accolades. It's about something much quieter." The room settled. Phones came up. But I didn't look at the crowd. I looked at the back, where I knew my family would be. "I want to thank someone," I continued, "who unknowingly taught me the most important lesson of all, what it feels like to be invisible." There was a flicker of motion in the audience, a cough, a shift in posture. For years I tried to earn attention, affection, a place at the table. I thought if I was impressive enough, loud enough, perfect enough, maybe I'd be seen. But the truth is, some people choose not to look, and their blindness has nothing to do with your worth. I paused, not for effect, but because the silence was so thick, I could feel it pressing into my chest. "I'm not here to blame. I'm here because I survived it, because I turned that silence into space, and in that space, I found my voice." People weren't clapping. They were listening. I'm proud to say I was once overlooked, because being ignored taught me empathy, being forgotten taught me resilience, and being silent taught me how to speak. I scanned the crowd briefly. Amber sat with her head lowered, her hands twisted in her lap. My mother's eyes were red. The seat beside her, Dad's, was empty. I finished with a smile. To anyone out there who feels invisible, I see you. And more importantly, I hope you learn to see yourself. The applause didn't start all at once. It rolled forward slowly, like a wave deciding whether to crash or retreat. Then it hit. Thunderous, unrelenting. The crowd stood. People wiped their eyes. Professors leaned forward. Students clapped until their hands hurt. I stepped back, just slightly, and let the moment belong to all of us. Backstage, a camera crew played back the live feed. In the lower corner, a brief shot had flashed across the screen. The row where my family sat. My father's seat was empty. The morning after graduation, my inbox overflowed. Emails from students, professors, strangers. They said they cried. They said they saw themselves in me. They said I gave them permission to finally speak. But the one message I waited for never came. No call, no text, no, I saw you. Just silence. And for the first time, it didn't ruin me. I recorded my first podcast that night. The mic felt foreign at first, like talking to a ghost version of myself. I titled the episode, Choosing to Be Seen. My voice was soft but steady as I spoke into the empty room, knowing someone out there needed to hear it. You don't need to forgive people to move on, I said. You don't owe anyone your healing. Sometimes healing is simply this, letting go of the people who never chose you, and deciding, for once, to choose yourself. The response was immediate. Thousands of downloads in the first week. Hundreds of messages poured in, some long, raw, others a single word. Thank you. I started recording weekly. It became therapy, not just for me but for others who'd been invisible in their own homes. I shared stories from school, small memories I'd buried, reflections I hadn't known I carried. One episode was titled, The Empty Seat. Another, She Called Me Amber. Then, weeks later, Mom reached out. She asked to meet, but her message was different this time. It didn't carry guilt or manipulation, just 5 words. I'd like to try again. We met at the same cafe as before. She was already seated when I arrived, no flowers, no pretense. Her face looked less fragile, more honest. We didn't hug. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then she reached across the table and gently placed her hand on mine. I'm sorry, she said quietly. Not because I didn't know, but because I was too weak to change anything. I was scared to lose him, and in the end I lost you instead. Her voice didn't shake. She didn't cry. She didn't defend herself. I looked at her and saw not a mother who failed, but a woman who had been drowning just as silently as I had. We weren't enemies. We were survivors of the same silence. I forgive you, I said, but I'm not coming back. She nodded. There was no protest, no guilt-tripping, just a breath of acceptance. Later that week, I signed the publishing deal for my memoir. The title had been clear from the moment I began writing, The Invisible Child. I typed my name at the bottom of the contract, the pen slightly trembling in my hand. Not from fear, but from a surreal sense of finality. The story I'd spent my life burying would finally be told, not as a cry for help, but as a guide for others climbing out of the same quiet hell. The book was scheduled to release the following spring, and my publisher suggested launching it alongside a philanthropic effort. So I created a scholarship fund, something small but meaningful, a space for students who, like me, had felt unseen, unsupported, unchosen. I named it the Amber Scholarship, not to glorify her, but to reclaim her name, to turn it into something generous instead of painful, a symbol of transformation. At the launch event, we hosted a small gathering, mostly faculty, a few community leaders, some former classmates. As I stood at the podium, thanking contributors and sharing my vision for the fund, I noticed movement near the back of the room. Amber. She stood there, wearing a muted blue dress, hair tied back simply. No cameras, no family entourage, just her. I paused mid-sentence, heart racing, unsure what to expect. But then she stepped forward, waited until the applause quieted, and asked to speak. Everyone turned. Amber took the mic and held it with both hands. Her voice trembled but never broke. "I don't deserve this honor," she began. "I don't deserve to have my name on anything she built. I know that, but maybe that's exactly why I'm here." She looked at me, eyes clear for once. No pride, no resentment. "Hailey and I grew up under the same roof, but I never really saw her. I was too busy being the center to realize who I was eclipsing. And I'm not here to say sorry, because she doesn't need my apology. I'm here to say, if she'll let me, I'd like to be part of something good. Something real." The room held its breath. I walked up to her, slowly. I didn't speak. I just looked at her. Really looked, for the first time not as a rival or a shadow, but as another human being finally choosing something better. She held out her hand. I took it. There was no lightning bolt, no swelling music, just warmth, just release. The adoption process took nearly a year. I met her at a community outreach program. 7 years old, quiet, a pair of oversized shoes, and a notebook she never let go of. Her name was Marley. She didn't speak much, not at first. She just watched people like she was waiting to find proof that someone wouldn't leave her behind. I saw her before she saw me, but when our eyes met, something in me shifted. I understood her silence like a native language. I filled out the forms, the same day. On the afternoon I brought her home, I knelt beside her at the doorway and took her hand. "From today on," I told her, "you will always be seen." That night she sat on my couch, hugging her notebook. I gave her a blanket, warm tea, and silence, because sometimes that's the first language trust speaks. She fell asleep with her head on my lap. I stayed still for hours. Just 2 weeks later, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Your father's in the hospital," she said, her voice dry and clipped. "A stroke." I felt my chest tighten, not out of panic, but confusion. That word, father, still felt foreign in my mouth. Still I went. The room was pale and sterile. Machines blinked softly. He lay there unconscious, one hand curled around the edge of the sheet, like he was still holding on to something unseen. There was a letter on the table beside his bed, unopened, addressed to me in handwriting I hadn't seen in years. I picked it up, opened it slowly. "Hailey," it began, shaky and uneven. "I don't know if I'll get this right. Probably not. But I wanted you to know. I've always seen you. I just never knew how to show it without feeling like I was failing someone else. I thought loving her louder would protect her. I didn't realize it was silencing you." My hands trembled. "I'm sorry for the years I let you feel invisible. I'm sorry I called you by the wrong name. But I always knew your name. I've always known your worth." It ended with, "If this never reaches you, I hope you find your own way home. And if it does, I hope you know I tried, even if I was late." I sat beside him, the letter resting on my lap. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just placed my hand gently on his chest, above his heart. "I see you too," I whispered. Weeks passed. Marley grew more open, sketching stories in her notebook, asking questions, sometimes even laughing. She started calling me Mom without being prompted. The first time she said it, we were brushing our teeth. I didn't react immediately, afraid I'd scare the word away. But later I cried in the hallway, quietly, gratefully. The book release came and went. The Invisible Child became a national bestseller, translated into 3 languages within the first year. I was invited to speak on panels, appear on talk shows, give commencement speeches at schools I'd never heard of. But none of it felt performative. I wasn't trying to be seen anymore. I was trying to light a path for others still lost in the dark. At one university, they offered me a full-time faculty position. Storytelling for the Forgotten. The name made me pause. It felt too on the nose, but also right. In my first lecture, I looked out at rows of students, some confident, some quiet, some just barely holding it together. "You don't need to have a tragic story to be here," I said. "But if you do, I want you to know. This is a space where your voice matters. This is a room where no one disappears." The class was silent. Then someone nodded, and then another. That's all I needed. One evening, after Marley had gone to bed and the apartment was quiet, I sat down to record a podcast. "My name is Hailey Walker," I began. "I used to be a shadow. I used to measure my worth in silence. But I've learned something. You don't have to fight for space when you finally learn to claim your own." I paused, then added, "I was once a shadow, but I've learned to let the light move through me." I posted the episode and went to sleep. The next morning, there was a message waiting in my inbox. It was from a teenage girl in rural Kentucky. She wrote, "I watched your speech. I read your book. I listened to every episode you've ever posted. I've never told anyone this, but I think my parents don't really see me. They see my sister, and my brother, and each other. But not me. I almost gave up trying. And then I heard your voice. You gave me courage not to disappear." I stared at the screen, heart swelling. Not with pride, but with something better. Connection. I hit reply and typed only one line. "I see you.